The sound came at dawn, a wailing so desperate, so human-like, that Emma Rodriguez stopped dead in her tracks. She'd been walking the perimeter of the abandoned Green Valley meat processing plant, trying to outpace the ghosts that haunted her sleep. For 6 weeks, she'd avoided this cursed place. But this morning, something had pulled her here. The crying grew weaker, dying. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away. She'd come to Millbrook to disappear, to escape judgment, to hide from a past that had destroyed her. Getting involved meant exposure. It meant risk. But that sound, God, that pitiful, fading cry, it pierced through her carefully constructed walls. She moved toward the old septic tank, and the smell hit her first chemicals, rot, death. Then she saw him. A German shepherd, barely keeping his massive head above toxic water. Eyes meeting hers with the recognition only the drowning understand. Sometimes salvation comes to those who need saving themselves. Before we continue, please leave a like and let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. Emma Rodriguez was 43 years old and had been running for 8 months. Once, she'd been a trauma nurse at St. Mary's Hospital in Chicago, competent, respected, the kind of professional who thrived in chaos. Then came the night that shattered everything. A 19-year-old girl named Sarah Webb had died on her watch. And though the official investigation cleared Emma of criminal wrongdoing, the guilt had buried itself so deep in her bones that she could no longer recognize herself in the mirror. She'd fled to Millbrook, Tennessee, 6 weeks ago, a town of 3,200 souls tucked into rolling hills where everyone knew everyone, and strangers were noticed. Emma had found a cheap cottage on the outskirts, near the abandoned plant that locals avoided like a graveyard. She worked part-time at the corner diner, kept her head down, spoke to no one unless necessary. Isolation had become her penance. The sleepless nights were the worst. She'd lie awake replaying that moment in the emergency room, the chaos, the blood, her exhausted hand writing the wrong dosage on the chart. 10 milligrams instead of 1. By the time they'd caught the error, Sarah Webb's young heart had already begun to fail. Emma could still see the girl's eyes, not accusing, but peaceful somehow as she whispered, "It's okay. You tried." But it wasn't okay. It would never be okay. Millbrook itself seemed frozen in time, the kind of place where the church was the center of everything, and Pastor William Thornton's Sunday sermons carried more weight than the mayor's proclamations. The Green Valley meat processing plant had closed in 2003 after some contamination scandal Emma didn't fully understand. 22 years later, it stood as a monument to corporate failure, its septic tank still filled with toxic industrial waste that no one had bothered to properly dispose of. Emma had taken this route by accident that Thursday morning, driven by restlessness and the suffocating weight of another sleepless night. She never walked this way. The plant unsettled her with its broken windows and rusted machinery, too much like the wreckage of her own life. But something had pulled her here today. Fate, perhaps, or punishment. She was no longer sure there was a difference. Emma ran. Her 43-year-old body hadn't moved this fast in months, but adrenaline propelled her back to the cottage. She burst through the door, scanning frantically for anything that might help. Rope, yes. There in the utility closet. Work gloves. A tarp. Her hands shook as she grabbed each item, her mind calculating angles and physics she hadn't thought about since high school. How deep was that tank? 12 feet. Maybe 15. How much did that dog weigh? 70. 85 pounds. No time to call animal control. By the time they arrived, he'd be dead. She ran back, the supplies awkward in her arms, her breath coming in gasps. The morning sun had risen higher now, illuminating the full horror of the scene. The German shepherd's head had dropped lower in the water. His cries had weakened to barely audible whimpers. "Hold on," Emma called down to him. "Just hold on." She tied the rope around the sturdiest piece of metal framework she could find, testing it with her full weight. It held. Then she fashioned a crude harness, her nurse's hands remembering knots from years of securing medical equipment. The toxic fumes rising from the tank made her eyes water, made her stomach heave, but she forced herself to the edge. Old metal rungs were embedded in the concrete wall, maintenance access from decades ago. Emma pulled on her work gloves and began climbing down, each rung slick with chemical residue. The smell intensified until it felt like breathing fire. Her exposed skin began to burn where droplets of contaminated water splashed. Halfway down, she could reach him. "Easy, boy," she murmured, though her voice shook. "I've got you." The dog was too exhausted to fight. When her hands touched his waterlogged fur, he simply looked at her with those intelligent brown eyes that held more understanding than seemed possible. Emma worked the makeshift harness around his chest, behind his front legs, pulling it snug but not tight enough to restrict his breathing. The climb back up was agony. The rope cut into her shoulders as she pulled, her legs bracing against the metal rungs, the dog's 85 pounds of dead weight threatening to drag them both down. Her muscles screamed. Chemical burns seared her hands even through the gloves. But she pulled, and pulled, and pulled. When the dog's body finally cleared the rim of the tank, Emma hauled him onto solid ground and collapsed beside him. Both of them lay there gasping, covered in toxic sludge that smelled of death and industrial poison. Emma forced herself to sit up, to examine him properly. What she saw made her chest tighten with rage. Beneath the matted, contaminated fur, she could see the outline of his ribs, severe malnutrition. His front paws were torn and bloody from clawing at concrete, nails worn down to the quick. Fresh bruises mottled his skin under the mess. And older scars, long healed, suggested this wasn't the first time someone had hurt him. He'd been beaten, starved, then left here to die. The dog didn't try to run when she wrapped him in the tarp. He simply surrendered to her touch. Too weak to do anything but let her carry him to her truck. Emma staggered under his weight. But she didn't stop until she had him settled in the back seat. At home. She filled the bathtub with lukewarm water, not hot, which would shock his hypothermic system, and spent the next 3 hours gently washing away layers of toxic waste. The water had to be changed 4 times before it finally ran clear. Gradually, his true colors emerged: tan and black, the classic German Shepherd coloring that should have been beautiful but was dulled by trauma and neglect. As she worked, Emma discovered his torn collar caught in his matted neck fur. She carefully removed it, squinting at the faded name tag. Hope, it read, with a phone number below so worn she could barely make out the digits. Hope. Someone had named this suffering creature Hope. Emma set the collar aside. She'd deal with it tomorrow. First, she needed to stabilize him. She prepared simple food, boiled chicken and rice, bland but nourishing. Hope managed only a few bites before exhaustion claimed him completely. Emma carried him to a nest of blankets in her living room and sat beside him, one hand on his damp fur, feeling his heartbeat. As she sat there in the gathering darkness, Emma's mind drifted back to another night. St. Mary's Hospital, the emergency room chaos, Sarah Webb's young face, eyes fluttering as the life drained from her because Emma had made a catastrophic error. The girl's final words haunted her. "It's okay. You tried." "I couldn't save her," Emma whispered to the sleeping dog. "But maybe I can save you." Was that what this was about? Redemption through a substitute trying to balance cosmic scales by saving an animal when she'd failed a human. Emma looked at Hope's battered body, at the scars that told stories of suffering he couldn't speak. He reminded her of Sarah, both of them victims of circumstances beyond their control, both discarded by a world that should have protected them. And if she was honest, Hope reminded her of herself, beaten down, abandoned, left to die in a toxic pit of despair. "If I can keep you alive," she said softly, "maybe I'm not completely worthless." But even as the words left her lips, fear coiled in her stomach. What if she failed again? What if trying wasn't enough? What if she let another innocent creature die? Friday morning arrived with pale light filtering through Emma's cottage windows. Hope was still sleeping, his breathing steady and deeper than the night before. Emma sat on the floor beside him, the torn collar in her hands, staring at that faded name tag as though it might reveal secrets beyond the smudged phone number. She'd debated all night whether to make this call. The right thing was to contact the owner, return the dog. But something in her gut twisted at the thought. Anyone who'd let this magnificent animal end up in a septic tank full of poison didn't deserve him back. Still, she needed to know. Emma dialed the number with trembling fingers. It rang 4 times before an elderly woman answered. "Hello? Hi, my name is Emma Rodriguez. I found a German Shepherd, and this number was on his collar. The name tag says, Hope." A long silence stretched across the line. Emma heard the woman's breath catch. "That's my granddaughter's dog," the woman finally said, her voice heavy with grief. "But she passed away 8 months ago." Emma's world tilted. Her mouth went dry. "What was your granddaughter's name?" "Sarah Webb. She was only 19 years old. Died during surgery at St. Mary's Hospital in Chicago." The phone nearly slipped from Emma's hand. The cottage walls seemed to close in. Sarah Webb. Sarah Webb's dog. The universe couldn't be this cruel, this deliberate in its punishment. "Are you still there?" the woman asked. "Yes," Emma managed, her voice barely audible. "I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you, dear. My son Marcus took Hope after Sarah died, but he hasn't been the same." The grief consumed him. "The woman, Mrs. Webb," Emma realized, sighed deeply. "He left town about 3 weeks ago. Said he couldn't keep the dog anymore. That looking at Hope reminded him too much of Sarah." "Why are you asking, where did you find him?" Emma's mind raced. Should she tell the truth that she'd found Hope dying in toxic waste, abandoned and abused, that Marcus Webb had essentially tried to kill his daughter's beloved dog? "I found him wandering." Emma lied. "He seems like he's been through a rough time. I just wanted to return him to his owner." "That's very kind of you." "Marcus is staying in Jackson, about 30 miles from here. Let me give you his number." Emma wrote down the digits, though her hand shook so badly the numbers were barely legible. They exchanged a few more pleasantries, and then Emma hung up. She sat in stunned silence, the phone still clutched in her white-knuckled grip. Sarah Webb's dog. Of all the animals in Tennessee, of all the abandoned creatures in the world, she'd rescued the dog that belonged to the girl whose death she'd caused. Was this cosmic punishment some kind of sick joke the universe was playing, or was it a sign, though, of what? Emma couldn't fathom. She looked at Hope, who was awake now, watching her with those intelligent brown eyes. He'd survived because of her. But his suffering existed because of her, too, in a way. When she'd failed Sarah, she'd created the grief that had driven Marcus Webb to hurt this innocent animal. "I killed his daughter," Emma whispered. "And he killed your spirit." Anger bloomed in her chest, white-hot and righteous. How dare Marcus Webb abandon this dog? Hope had been Sarah's companion, her friend, perhaps the last living connection to the girl who died too young. And Marcus had thrown him away like garbage, left him to suffer and die in a pit of toxic waste. Emma's hands clenched into fists. She should call Marcus right now, tell him what he'd done, confront him with his cruelty. But then what? If Marcus discovered who she was, the nurse responsible for his daughter's death, what would happen? Would he demand Hope back out of spite? Would he finish what he'd started and ensure the dog died this time? And if she surrendered Hope to animal control anonymously, let them deal with it. At least the dog would be safe from Marcus. But Hope had already been abandoned once. How could she abandon him again? Emma looked into those brown eyes, saw the way Hope watched her with cautious trust, and made her decision. "No," she said firmly, reaching out to rest her hand on his head. "You've been abandoned enough. I'll keep you until you're healthy, and then we'll figure out what comes next." That night, around midnight, Hope woke disoriented. He lifted his head, ears swiveling, trying to make sense of his new surroundings. A soft whimper escaped him, not pain but confusion and fear. Emma was beside him instantly, settling onto the floor, one hand gently stroking his head. "It's okay," she murmured. "You're safe now." And then, because the darkness and exhaustion had stripped away her defenses, because this dog couldn't judge her or condemn her, Emma began to talk. "Your girl," she said softly, her voice breaking. "Sarah. She was so young. Hope. Only 19. Had her whole life ahead of her, college, dreams, maybe a family someday. She wanted to be a veterinarian. Did you know that?" Hope's ears perked at Sarah's name, and Emma's heart cracked a little more. "I tried to save her. I really did. But I made the wrong call, gave her the wrong medication dosage and all the chaos. By the time I realized my mistake..." She couldn't finish the sentence. The memory was too raw, too vivid even after 8 months. Hope did something extraordinary then. He lifted his head and licked Emma's hand, a gentle, deliberate gesture. His first truly affectionate movement since the rescue. Emma broke down completely, shoulders shaking with sobs she'd held back for months. "I'm so sorry." She wept into his fur. "I'm so sorry." Hope responded by laying his head in her lap, his weight solid and warm and comforting. He couldn't possibly understand what she was confessing, couldn't know the role she'd played in his beloved Sarah's death. But he offered comfort anyway, instinctive and pure. "You forgive me, don't you?" Emma whispered, running her fingers through his fur. "Even though you don't know what I did." They fell asleep that way, a broken woman and a broken dog, each one saving the other without fully understanding how. For the first time in 8 months, Emma slept without nightmares. And for the first time in weeks, Hope slept without fear. In the morning, everything would get more complicated. But for now, in the quiet darkness of that cottage, 2 damaged souls had found something neither expected: peace. The first hint of trouble came on Saturday morning when Emma took Hope to see Dr. James Patterson, the local veterinarian whose clinic sat on Main Street between the hardware store and the post office. Hope had been gaining strength steadily, eating more each day, and Emma wanted a professional assessment of his recovery. She'd been hand-feeding him boiled chicken and rice, watching with quiet satisfaction as his ribs became less prominent, as his coat began to regain some luster. Dr. Patterson was a kind man in his 60s, with gentle hands and a soft voice that seemed to calm even the most frightened animals. He examined Hope thoroughly, noting the healing chemical burns, the infected wounds that were finally closing, the way the dog's eyes tracked Emma's every movement with devoted attention. "He's doing remarkably well," Dr. Patterson said, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. This boy trusts you completely." But it was the receptionist, Gladys Morrison, who changed everything. Gladys was a fixture in Millbrook, a woman in her 70s who knew every piece of gossip before it happened and considered it her civic duty to spread information. She'd been listening from the front desk, and when Emma signed the payment slip with her full name, Emma Rodriguez, something clicked behind Gladys's sharp eyes. "Rodriguez," Gladys said slowly, her voice carrying that particular tone of someone piecing together a puzzle. "Emma Rodriguez. Why does that name sound familiar?" Emma's stomach dropped. She mumbled something about needing to get home, gathered Hope's leash and hurried out. But the damage was done. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, Emma's phone, the local number she'd been forced to get for the diner job, began ringing. The first message was curt: "We know who you are." The second was angrier: "How dare you show your face in a decent town?" The third made her hands shake: "Sarah Webb's family lives in Jackson. Did you come here to torment them?" Gladys had made the connection. The story had been in the Chicago papers 8 months ago. Nurse's error costs teen her life. Gladys had a cousin in Illinois who'd sent her the article. Now, through the efficient grapevine of small-town gossip, everyone in Millbrook knew that the quiet woman working at the corner diner was the nurse who'd killed Sarah Webb. Emma sat on her cottage floor that night, Hope's head in her lap, listening to message after message fill her voicemail. Some were merely cold, Others dripped with righteous fury. She didn't blame them. How could she? She'd spent 8 months condemning herself in harsher terms than any stranger could manage. Sunday morning. She stayed home from church, not that she'd been attending anyway. But Pastor William Thornton came to her. He arrived at 10 o'clock with 3 church elders, their cars parked deliberately in her driveway like a blockade. "Miss Rodriguez," Pastor Thornton said when she opened the door. He was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of commanding presence that made even the mayor defer to him. "We know who you are. This is a Christian community built on trust and moral character." Emma stood in the doorway, Hope at her side, saying nothing. One of the elders, a stern-faced woman named Margaret Hayes, spoke up. "We've learned that you've been accepting charity donations from our church fund through your wages at the diner. And you've been using that money to pay for a dog's medical care." "The money I earned," Emma said quietly. "My wages. Money donated by church members to help struggling workers," Pastor Thornton corrected. "Not to be squandered on animals when there are people in need." "This dog is a living creature who was left to die," Emma said, feeling Hope press closer against her leg. "You couldn't save a human life," Margaret Hayes said, her voice sharp as glass. "Now you're wasting church resources on a dog. Where are your priorities?" The words struck like a physical blow. Emma's throat tightened, but she forced herself to meet their judgmental eyes. "This dog is a victim too. He deserves a chance." Pastor Thornton's expression hardened. "Miss Rodriguez, we're asking you to surrender the animal to animal control. Let them handle it appropriately. And we believe it would be best if you found employment elsewhere. Your presence here is divisive." "Get off my property," Emma heard herself say. Her voice was steady despite the trembling in her hands. The pastor's eyebrows rose. "I beg your pardon. I said get off my property. This is my home. That dog is under my care. You have no authority here." They left with tight lips and meaningful glances. Pastor Thornton's parting words hanging in the air like a threat. "This isn't over, Miss Rodriguez. The community will have its say." Monday brought the crisis Emma had been dreading. Hope woke at dawn with a high fever, his body shaking with tremors that escalated into full seizures. Emma wrapped him in blankets and rushed him to Dr. Ward Patterson's clinic, her heart hammering against her ribs as Hope convulsed in the back seat. "Doctor." Patterson's face grew grave as he examined the dog. "It's a delayed reaction to the chemical exposure. His organs are shutting down, kidneys primarily. Without immediate treatment, he'll die by nightfall." "What kind of treatment?" Emma asked, though she already knew the answer would be expensive. "Dialysis, medications, possibly surgery. I'm looking at $2,800 minimum." Emma had $400 to her name. Her savings had been depleted by Hope's initial treatments, and now she'd lost her job at the diner. "Doctor." Patterson offered a payment plan, his kind eyes full of sympathy. But even he couldn't perform miracles without payment guarantees. "Without treatment immediately," he said gently. "The humane choice is euthanasia. End his suffering." Emma sat in the veterinary clinic parking lot for an hour, engine running, Hope seizing periodically in the back seat. The seizures were growing weaker now, not because he was recovering, but because he was dying. She'd failed. Again. She couldn't save Sarah Webb. And now she couldn't even save a dog. The animal shelter was 3 miles away. They would take him, put him down peacefully. It would be mercy. Wouldn't it better than watching him suffer through organ failure? Better than the guilt of another death on her conscience. She started driving, tears blurring her vision. The shelter sign appeared ahead. Emma pulled into the parking lot, put the car in park, and looked back at Hope through the rearview mirror. He was unconscious now, his breathing shallow. But as she watched, his paw moved weakly, reaching toward the front seat, reaching toward her. The paw came to rest on her arm, such a small gesture, such a deliberate one despite his weakness. and Emma was suddenly back in St. Mary's emergency room, Sarah Webb's hand reaching out in those final moments, her young fingers wrapping around Emma's wrist. "It's okay," Sarah had whispered. "You tried." "No," Emma said aloud, her voice breaking. "No, I won't abandon you. I failed her, but I won't fail you." She threw the car into reverse and drove back to Dr. Patterson's clinic, doing 15 miles over the speed limit. She burst through the door, Hope limp in her arms, and said to the startled veterinarian, "Save him. I'll figure out the money. I'll work it off. I'll beg. I'll just please save him." Dr. Patterson looked at her for a long moment, seeing something in her desperation that moved him. "All right," he said quietly. "I believe in second chances, Emma. For both of you." Hope survived the night. Dr. Patterson worked late, administering fluids, medications, monitoring vitals with the dedication of a man who understood that sometimes saving one life means everything. Emma slept on the clinic floor, her hand through the kennel bars touching Hope's fur, afraid that if she let go he would slip away. Tuesday morning, Hope's fever broke. Wednesday, he lifted his head. Thursday, he ate from Emma's hand. The veterinary staff watched in quiet amazement as Emma spent every waking hour at the clinic, talking to Hope in soft tones, telling him stories about Sarah Webb, the girl she'd failed, the girl whose dog he'd been, the girl who'd somehow brought them together. "He's chosen you," Dr. Patterson observed one evening, watching Hope refuse to eat unless Emma was the one holding the bowl. Dogs know who they need. But Friday brought new storms. When Emma finally returned home with Hope, she found her cottage door spray-painted with a single word in blood-red letters, "Killer," her landlord called that afternoon. "I'm sorry, Miss Rodriguez, but I'm getting complaints from neighbors. I'm going to need you to vacate by the end of the month." The local newspaper, the Millbrook Chronicle, ran an article on page 2, former Chicago nurse living in Millbrook. It included details about Sarah's death, the investigation, Emma's negligence. The reporter had done their homework, painting Emma as someone fleeing justice rather than grief. The diner owner called next. "Emma, I can't have this controversy. I'm sorry, but I have to let you go." That evening, flyers appeared on telephone poles throughout town. Town meeting Saturday 7 p.m. Community Center, to discuss the moral character of community members. Emma sat on her cottage steps with Hope beside her, reading the flyer someone had stuffed in her mailbox. Her hands didn't shake anymore. She felt numb, hollowed out, like she'd already lost everything that mattered. "Maybe they're right," she whispered to Hope. "Maybe I don't deserve to be here, or anywhere." Hope leaned his weight against her, solid and warm and alive. Saturday afternoon, as Emma was packing boxes and preparing to leave Millbrook forever, someone knocked on her door. She opened it expecting more condemnation and found instead an elderly woman with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Emma Rodriguez?" the woman asked gently. "Yes. I'm Patricia Webb, Sarah's grandmother." Emma's world tilted. She gripped the doorframe for support. "May I come in, Mrs. Webb asked. Emma stepped aside wordlessly. Mrs. Webb entered the small cottage, her eyes immediately finding Hope, who stood watching her with alert curiosity. The old woman's face crumpled, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "He looks so much better," she whispered. "Sarah loved him so much. She rescued him from a puppy mill when she was 16. Nursed him back to health. They were inseparable." "I'm so sorry about Sarah," Emma managed to say, her voice raw. "I'm so sorry." Mrs. Webb looked at her with an expression Emma couldn't quite read. "I know who you are. I knew when you called last week." Emma's breath caught. "I've read the hospital reports." Mrs. Webb continued. "All of them. I know it was an accident, a terrible mistake made during chaos. You didn't kill my granddaughter out of malice or negligence. You were trying to save her in impossible circumstances. I gave her the wrong dosage, Emma said, the confession tearing out of her. I was exhausted, and I wrote down the wrong number, and she died because of my mistake. Yes, Mrs. Poole, Webb said simply. And you'll carry that for the rest of your life. But Emma, tragedy happens. Bad decisions happen. That doesn't make you a murderer. Emma couldn't speak, could only stand there as tears poured down her face. Mrs. Webb's expression grew troubled. But I came here to warn you. My son Mark is Sarah's father. He doesn't see things the way I do. He's been consumed by grief and rage. He blames you completely. I know, Emma whispered. He's coming to the town meeting tonight. He knows you're here. He knows you have Sarah's dog. Mrs. Webb paused. I don't know what he'll do. Should I give Hope back to him? Emma asked, though the thought made her chest ache. Mrs. Webb looked at Hope, who had settled at Emma's feet. That dog is alive and healthy because of you. My son nearly killed him with neglect and anger. He took all his grief out on this innocent animal. No, you shouldn't give Hope back. She moved toward the door, then turned back. Tonight will be hard. The town will judge you. Marcus will confront you, but Emma Truth has a way of setting things right. Have faith in that. After she left, Emma sat on the floor with Hope, her arms around his neck. What am I going to do? Boy, she whispered. Hope licked her face. And for the first time in 8 months, Emma felt something other than crushing guilt. She felt purpose. All right, she said, standing up. If they want to judge me, let them. But they're going to hear the truth, all of it. She looked down at Hope, who gazed up at her with absolute trust. We face this together. The Millbrook Community Center had never felt so small. 230 people crammed into a space meant for half that number. Their conversations creating a low roar that made Emma's head pound as she stepped through the door. She'd arrived deliberately late, hoping to slip into the back unnoticed. But the moment she entered with Hope on a leash, silence fell like a guillotine blade. Every head turned, every eye fixed on her with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. Emma felt their judgment like a physical weight pressing down on her shoulders, making each step toward an empty chair in the back row feel like walking through deep water. Hope pressed close against her leg, sensing her distress. His warmth was the only thing keeping her upright. Pastor William Thornton stood at the podium at the front of the room, his silver hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Behind him sat several church elders and town council members, their faces arranged in expressions of solemn concern. But it was the man in the front row who made Emma's breath catch. Marcus Webb. She recognized him from the photos Mrs. Misha Webb had shown her, though the man in those pictures had been smiling, vibrant, alive. This Marcus was a ghost, mid-40s but looking a decade older, with sunken cheeks and eyes that burned with the kind of pain that never fully heals. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Emma took her seat, Hope settling at her feet. She could feel the weight of 200 stairs, could hear the whispers starting up again like rustling leaves. That's her. Can you believe the audacity by bringing the dog here like some kind of shield? Pastor Thornton raised his hands for silence. Friends, neighbors, thank you for coming tonight. We gather as a community because we share values, trust, integrity, moral character. These foundations are what make Millbrook a good place to raise our families, to live our lives. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room before landing deliberately on Emma. But recently, questions have arisen about whether certain individuals living among us truly reflect those values. We're here tonight not to condemn, but to discuss whether our community standards are being upheld. He didn't name Emma directly. He didn't need to. I'd like to open the floor for comments, Pastor Thornton said, stepping back from the podium. Gladys Morrison was the first to stand, her 70-year-old frame practically vibrating with self-righteous energy. That woman, she said, pointing directly at Emma, killed a 19-year-old girl in Chicago. A medical error that cost an innocent young woman her life. And now she's here, hiding in our town, using money from our church charity fund to pay for a dog's medical care while people in this community go hungry. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. It's an insult, Gladys continued, warming to her subject. An absolute insult to human decency. Tom Parker, who owned the hardware store, stood next. I got nothing against second chances, but this woman is hiding from what she'd done. That's not repentance, that's cowardice. How can we trust her? Margaret Hayes added, standing with her arms crossed. If she made a fatal mistake once, what's to stop her from doing it again? She's working with the public. What if someone else gets hurt? The voices built on each other, creating a wave of condemnation that crashed over Emma's head. She sat frozen, Hope whining softly beside her, aware that his person was in distress. Then Marcus Webb stood, and the room fell absolutely silent. He turned to face the crowd, and Emma could see his hands shaking. His voice, when he spoke, was rough with barely contained emotion. That woman, he said, and Emma flinched at the venom in the word, took my daughter from me, my Sarah. She was 19 years old, beautiful, brilliant, going to be a veterinarian. She had her whole life ahead of her: college, career, maybe a family someday. Everything. His voice cracked, and he paused to compose himself. Sarah was in a car accident. Nothing too serious, we thought, but internal bleeding. They didn't catch it fast enough. And when they finally got her into surgery, that nurse, he pointed at Emma without looking at her. She gave Sarah the wrong medication, wrong dosage, a mistake that turned a survivable injury into a death sentence. Emma felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. Do you know what it's like to bury your child? Marcus asked the crowd. To put your baby girl on the ground, to go home to a house full of her things, her clothes, her books, her dreams, and know you'll never see her smile again. Several people in the crowd were crying now. Emma saw mothers clutching their children closer. After Sarah died, I couldn't function, Marcus continued. Couldn't work, couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything except the fact that my daughter was gone. And every time I looked at that dog, he gestured at Hope, I saw her, her hand scratching behind his ears, her laugh when he'd do something silly, her voice calling him. Marcus's composure was crumbling, his words coming faster now, more desperate. So I got rid of him. I drove him to that abandoned plant, and I left him there. Left him in that septic tank to die because I couldn't stand looking at him anymore. Couldn't stand the reminder of what I'd lost. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even Pastor Thornton looked shocked. And then I find out, Marcus's voice rose, that she saved him. The woman who killed my daughter saved her dog. And now she's living 30 miles from my mother, in our community, playing hero while my daughter rots in the ground. He turned finally to look at Emma, his eyes blazing with grief and fury. You took everything from me, and now you've taken even my right to my daughter's memory. You don't get to be the savior here. You don't get redemption through Sarah's dog. The silence that followed was suffocating. Emma felt every eye on her, waiting for her response, her defense, her explanation. Pastor Thornton cleared his throat. Miss Rodriguez, do you have anything to say? Emma stood slowly, her legs trembling. Hope rose with her, pressed against her side. She looked at Marcus Webb, at his ravaged face and haunted eyes. And she saw her own reflection there, the face she'd been seeing in the mirror for 8 months. No, she said quietly. He's right. Confusion flickered across several faces. This wasn't the defense they'd expected. I did kill Sarah Webb, Emma continued, her voice steady despite the tears now streaming down her face. Not with my hands, not with intent, but with my failure, with my exhaustion and my mistake and my human fallibility. She took a shaking breath. It was 3 a.m. The emergency room was chaos, a multi-car pileup on the interstate, 4 critical patients, Sarah Webb was patient number 3, internal bleeding from blunt force trauma. We were scrambling. Everyone running on fumes. I'd been on shift for 16 hours. The room was absolutely still, everyone hanging on her words. I wrote the prescription. Anticoagulant to prevent clotting. But I wrote 10 milligrams instead of 1. My hand was shaking from exhaustion. The numbers blurred, and by the time we caught the error, her voice broke. She was dying, and I was the one who killed her. Not the accident. Not fate. Me. Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I've been running from that moment for 8 months. From the investigation, from the looks, from the weight of knowing that a 19-year-old girl is dead because I made a mistake. I came here to disappear, to be invisible, to punish myself in silence. She looked at Hope, who gazed up at her with absolute trust. And then I found this dog drowning in toxic waste. Left to die by his own owner, clawing at concrete walls until his paws bled, crying for help that wasn't coming. Emma's voice grew stronger. So yes, I used money I earned to save him. Yes, I chose to help an animal when I couldn't save a human. And yes, Mr. Webb, I understand your rage, your grief, your hatred of me. She turned to face Marcus directly. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But this dog, her voice rose with sudden passion. He's innocent. He's a victim of my failure too. Because when I failed Sarah, I created the grief that made you hurt him. He didn't deserve to be abandoned any more than Sarah deserved to die. The room was electrified now, people leaning forward. So call me a killer. Call me whatever you want. Hate me. Condemn me. But don't you dare say this dog doesn't deserve to live. Don't you dare say that saving one innocent life is worthless just because I failed to save another. Her voice cracked with emotion. Every life has value. Human, animal, all of it. I failed to save a human being, and I'll carry that guilt until I die. But I will not fail this dog. I won't abandon him the way I feel like I abandoned Sarah. I won't give up on him the way everyone wants me to give up on myself. Emma was shaking now, her words tumbling out in a torrent. If this is my only redemption, saving one broken, abused animal who deserved better than what this world gave him, then I'll take it. And if that makes me worthy of your judgment, then judge me. But I won't apologize for choosing life over death. Not anymore. The silence that followed was absolute. Emma stood there, chest heaving, tears streaming, feeling naked and exposed before the entire community. And then Hope did something extraordinary. He walked away from Emma, crossed the open space between them, and sat down directly in front of Marcus Webb. Marcus stared down at the dog, this creature he'd tried to kill, who now looked up at him with dark, intelligent eyes full of something Marcus couldn't quite name. Hope lifted his right paw, held it up in the air. Marcus made a sound half sob, half gasp. "Oh God," he whispered. "Oh my God." His hands came up to his face, and his whole body began to shake. "She taught him that," he said, his voice muffled. "Sarah taught him that trick. Shake hands with your friends. Hope," she'd say. "Show them you trust them." Marcus dropped to his knees, and Hope placed his paw on Marcus's outstretched hand. The man crumbled, wrapping his arms around the dog's neck, sobbing into his fur with the kind of grief that's been locked away too long. "I'm sorry," Marcus wept. "God, I'm so sorry. Hope, I'm sorry. Sarah, I'm sorry." Emma stood frozen, watching this broken man embrace the dog they'd both failed in different ways. Several people in the crowd were openly crying now. The atmosphere had shifted from judgment to something raw, more human. Hope licked Marcus's face, patient and gentle, forgiving in the way only animals can forgive. Emma approached slowly, carefully, and knelt beside them. Marcus looked up at her, his face ravaged by tears. "I wanted to hate you," he said, his voice hoarse. "I needed someone to blame, someone to carry all this rage and pain." But looking at him alive, healthy, trusting, he couldn't finish. "We're both broken. Emma said softly. Both destroyed by that night. I nearly killed her dog, Marcus said, horror dawning in his eyes. The thing she loved most after me. What kind of father does that? The kind who's drowning in grief, Emma answered. The kind who doesn't know how to survive losing a child. Marcus reached out, and Emma took his hand. They knelt there together, both of them touching hope. This living bridge between their shared tragedy. Maybe, Emma whispered. We don't have to stay destroyed. Pastor Thornton had been standing at the podium throughout this exchange, his expression shifting from stern judgment to something softer, more uncertain. But as he opened his mouth to speak, to reclaim control of the meeting, a woman's voice called out from the back of the room. Wait, there's something else you all need to know. Patricia Webb stood, her silver hair catching the light, her face serene and determined. My granddaughter Sarah left something behind. Something that changes everything. She walked to the front of the room, carrying a small cardboard box, while the entire town watched in breathless silence. Emma barely slept that night. After the town meeting had dissolved into tearful conversations and tentative embraces, after Marcus had asked if he could visit Hope the next morning, after Pastor Thornton had quietly apologized for his harsh judgment, Emma had driven home with a lightness in her chest she hadn't felt in months. Hope had curled up beside her bad Buell. And for the first time since Sarah Webb's death, Emma had drifted off believing that maybe, just maybe, redemption was possible. The seizure began at 3 a.m. Emma woke to Hope's body convulsing violently on the floor, his legs rigid, foam flecking his jaws. She'd seen enough medical emergencies to know this wasn't like his previous episode. This was catastrophic. No, 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 she whispered, dropping to her knees beside him. Not now, please, not now. She wrapped him in blankets and carried his 85 pounds of dead weight to her truck, her arms screaming with the effort. Hope's breathing was shallow and rapid, his eyes rolled back in his head. Emma drove through the dark streets of Millbrook doing 70 miles an hour, praying no police would stop her, praying even harder that Hope would still be breathing when she arrived. The nearest emergency veterinary clinic was in Nashville, 90 minutes away. Emma made it in 70, running 2 red lights and taking curves that made her tires squeal. She kept one hand on Hope's side, feeling for the rise and fall of his ribs, terrified each time there was a pause between breaths. The emergency clinic was a bright, sterile building that never closed. Emma burst through the automatic doors carrying Hope, and a young veterinarian in blue scrubs immediately took charge. How long has he been seizing? The vet asked, her nameplate reading Dr. Sarah Chen. Since 3 a.m., about 90 minutes. Emma's voice was hoarse from crying during the drive. Dr. Chen's expression grew grave as she examined Hope. Get him into ICU immediately. She called to a technician. To Emma. I need his medical history. Everything. Emma explained it all in a rush: the septic tank, the chemical exposure, the previous infection, the recovery. Dr. Chen listened while working, inserting IV lines, drawing blood, barking orders to her team. 30 minutes later, Dr. Chen found Emma in the waiting room, and the expression on her face made Emma's stomach drop. His kidneys are failing, Dr. Chen said, sitting down beside Emma. The toxic chemical exposure caused delayed damage. His body has been trying to compensate, but it's reached a tipping point. Without intervention, he'll be dead by this afternoon. What kind of intervention? Emma asked, though she already knew the answer would break her. Dialysis to stabilize him. Then possibly a kidney transplant. Though finding a donor match is difficult and expensive. We're looking at $15,000 to $25,000 for treatment. Dr. Chen's voice was gentle but honest. Or we can end his suffering now, humanely. Emma sat very still, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of antiseptic burning her nostrils. She had $400 left in her bank account. No job, no prospects, no way to conjure $20,000 out of thin air. How long do I have to decide? She whispered. He's in pain. Dr. Suo Chen said quietly. The kindest thing might be to let him go peacefully before the pain gets worse. Emma's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. On my way to see Hope. Thank you for last night. For everything. She stared at the message, her vision blurring with tears. After everything, the rescue, the recovery, the town meeting breakthrough, the moment of forgiveness, it was all going to end here in a sterile waiting room with a decision no one should have to make. She called Marcus. He answered on the first ring. Emma, I'm about 20 minutes from your place. Is everything okay? He's dying, Emma said, her voice breaking. Hope is dying? I'm in Nashville at the emergency vet. His kidneys are failing. Silence on the other end. Then, I'm coming. Send me the address. Marcus arrived 45 minutes later, still wearing the clothes from the night before, looking like he hadn't slept either. Emma stood when she saw him, and without a word, they embraced two people who'd been enemies 12 hours ago, now united in their fear of losing the creature who'd brought them together. Can we see him? Marcus asked Dr. Chen. They were led to the ICU, a room filled with kennels and monitoring equipment. Hope lay on a padded table, tubes running from his legs, monitors beeping softly. He was unconscious, his breathing assisted by oxygen, his once vibrant body reduced to a fragile shell. Marcus made a sound like he'd been punched. Emma took his hand. They sat with Hope for 2 hours, taking turns stroking his head, his ears, anywhere they could touch him without disturbing the medical equipment. Marcus told stories about Sarah, how she'd found Hope at a puppy mill, how she'd nursed him through parvo as a puppy, how the two of them had been inseparable. She wanted to open an animal sanctuary, Marcus said, his voice thick with tears. That was her dream. After she got her veterinary degree, she was going to buy land and rescue animals that nobody else wanted. She'd say, Dad, every life matters. Every single one deserves a chance. Emma wept silently, understanding now the full weight of what Sarah Webb had been, what the world had lost. She sounds like she was extraordinary, Emma whispered. She was, Marcus said. And she didn't die because you're a bad person. Emma, she died because life is fragile and cruel, and sometimes there are no good choices, only terrible ones. He looked at Hope, his hand resting on the dog's still chest. Like now. They sat in silence for a long time. Then Marcus said what they were both thinking. We should let him go. End his suffering. It's what Sarah would want. She never believed in prolonging pain for selfish reasons. Emma knew he was right. Keeping Hope alive now, with no way to pay for treatment, was cruelty disguised as love. The kindest thing, the most loving thing, was to let him slip away peacefully while they were both here, while he knew he wasn't alone. Okay, Emma whispered. Okay. They called Dr. Chen, signed the papers with shaking hands. The veterinarian prepared the injection with practiced gentleness, explaining what would happen, how peaceful it would be. Emma and Marcus positioned themselves on either side of Hope, their hands on his warm body, feeling the faint beat of his failing heart. Thank you for teaching me I could still care, Emma whispered to him. Thank you for not giving up when I almost did. Marcus's voice was barely audible. Tell Sarah we're sorry. Both of us. Tell her we tried to do right by you. Dr. Chen approached with the syringe, her expression professionally compassionate. You're both very brave, she said. He's lucky to have had you both at the end. She positioned the needle near Hope's IV line. Emma closed her eyes, unable to watch, her hand gripping Marcus's so tightly she could feel both their pulses racing in tandem. Wait! The receptionist burst into the ICU, her face flushed. Dr. Chen, there's a call, it's urgent. You need to take this. Dr. Chen paused, irritation flickering across her face at the interruption. I'm in the middle of, it's about the dog. the receptionist insisted. Please, you need to take this call right now. Doctor. Chen set down the syringe and stepped out. Emma and Marcus sat frozen, Hope's life hanging in the balance, neither daring to hope. 2 minutes later, Dr. Chen returned, her phone in her hand and an expression of complete astonishment on her face. You need to see this, she said, turning her phone screen toward them. Emma looked at the screen and couldn't process what she was seeing. A GoFundMe page with Hope's picture, the photo Dr. Eb Patterson had taken 3 days ago showing Hope's recovery. The title read, Save Hope, A Story of Redemption. The amount raised, $43,287. What? Emma couldn't form words. Your local veterinarian, Dr. Patterson, started it last night after the town meeting. Dr. Chen explained, her voice filled with wonder. Someone filmed the meeting. The video went viral overnight. Millions of views. Your speech. Mr. Webb's breakdown. Hope's reaction. People are calling it the most powerful thing they've ever seen. She scrolled through the comments, hundreds of them appearing every minute. Save Hope. Everyone deserves second chances. This is what humanity looks like. Crying at my desk, please let that dog live. I gave $100, worth every penny to see this story have a happy ending. Marcus stared at the phone, tears streaming down his face. Sarah, he whispered. Sarah's watching. I know she is. Emma couldn't speak. Could only watch as the number climbed higher. $43,500, $44,000, $44,300. Dr. Chen smiled, the first genuine smile Emma had seen from her. So, should we save this dog? Hope's surgery lasted 6 hours. Emma and Marcus sat in the waiting room together, their hands occasionally finding each other during the worst moments of uncertainty. They didn't speak much, there wasn't much to say that hadn't already been said. But the silence between them was no longer hostile. It was the silence of two people who'd walked through fire together and emerged on the other side, changed. Marcus's phone kept buzzing with notifications. The video from the town meeting had been shared on every social media platform imaginable. News outlets were picking up the story. Nurse who lost patient saves patient's dog, read one headline. Forgiveness in a small Tennessee town, read another. The comment sections were filled with people sharing their own stories of redemption, of second chances, of the healing power of animals. But Emma couldn't focus on any of it. Her entire being was concentrated on the surgery happening behind those sterile doors, on Hope fighting for his life one more time. At hour 5, Mrs. Patricia Webb arrived, carrying a wooden box that looked like it had been in her family for generations. She sat down beside her son, placed a weathered hand on his knee, and said simply, "There's something you need to know." Marcus looked at his mother with red-rimmed eyes. "Mom, I can't handle any more right now. You need to," she said firmly. "Both of you." She turned to include Emma in her gaze. What happened to Sarah wasn't the end of her story, and you both need to understand that before Hope wakes up. Emma felt a chill run down her spine at the certainty in the old woman's voice. Before Hope wakes up. Not if. Mrs. Webb opened the box and pulled out a leather-bound journal. Its pages worn from use. This was Sarah's. She kept it through high school and college. I've been going through her things, trying to find the courage to sort them. Her voice wavered but held. And I found something. She opened the journal to a page marked with a faded ribbon. And Emma could see Sarah's handwriting, neat, careful. The handwriting of someone who chose their words with intention. This entry is from October, 2 months before the accident. Mrs. Webb said. She took a breath and began to read aloud, October 15th. I did something today that feels important, though I haven't told Mom or Dad yet. I updated my driver's license to be an organ donor. I know Dad would freak out. He's always been weird about mortality, about even acknowledging that bad things can happen. But I've been thinking about it a lot, especially after what happened at the shelter last week. Mrs. Webb's voice caught, but she continued. We had to euthanize 3 dogs because nobody wanted them. Perfectly healthy animals with years of life ahead of them. Gone because of space and resources in a world that doesn't value every life equally. It broke my heart, and it made me realize something. Life is so fragile. We're all just one accident, one illness, one random Tuesday away from the end. And when my time comes, whether that's at 90 or 19 or somewhere in between, I don't want it to be the end of everything. I want my death to mean something. I want every part of me that can help someone else live to have that chance. Marcus made a strangled sound. Emma reached for his hand without thinking, and he gripped it like a lifeline. Mrs. Webb continued reading. Every life deserves a chance. That's what I believe. Human, animal, all of it. If my heart can beat in someone else's chest, if my lungs can help someone breathe, if any part of me can give another person more time with their family, then that's what should happen. That's the only thing that makes sense. Mom would understand. She's always been practical about these things. Dad would need time, but eventually he'd see it's what I wanted. And hope. Mrs. Webb's voice broke here. Hope would understand too. He knows that love means giving everything you have to those who need it. The journal entry ended there. Mrs. Webb closed the book gently, tears streaming down her weathered face. She never told us, Marcus whispered. Why didn't she tell us? Because she knew you'd worry. Mrs. Webb said. Because she was 19 and thought she had all the time in the world to have that conversation. She reached into the box again and pulled out an envelope, still sealed, with the St. Mary's Hospital logo in the corner. I found this in your mailbox last month, Marcus. You haven't picked up your mail since the funeral. You couldn't face it. Marcus stared at the envelope like it might burn him. Open it, his mother said gently. It's time. With shaking hands, Marcus tore open the envelope. Inside was an official letter on hospital letterhead, dated 2 weeks after Sarah's death. Emma watched as his eyes moved across the page, watched as his face transformed from grief to shock to something that looked like wonder. She saved them, he whispered. She saved 5 people. Emma's breath caught. What? Marcus looked up, tears streaming freely now. Her organs. The hospital is notifying us that Sarah's organs were successfully transplanted to 5 recipients. Her heart went to a 7-year-old girl in Indiana who'd been waiting for 3 years. Her lungs to a 42-year-old father of 3. Her liver to a teenager with congenital disease. Both kidneys to patients in renal failure. Her corneas gave sight to a man who'd been blind since childhood. The words hung in the air like a benediction. 5 people, Marcus repeated, his voice filled with awe. She saved 5 people even after. He looked at Emma, and there was no accusation in his eyes now, only understanding. You didn't kill my daughter, Emma. You lost a patient. Sarah knew the risks of medicine. She was going into pre-med, for God's sake. She understood that sometimes people do everything right and the outcome is still tragedy. But I made a mistake, Emma said, her voice barely audible. Yes, Marcus said. You made a mistake. And Sarah died, and 5 other people lived. Would those people have received organs if Sarah hadn't been in that emergency room that night, if she hadn't been in the system? Documented, with her wishes clearly stated. Emma couldn't answer, couldn't process the enormity of what he was saying. Mrs. Webb spoke up, her voice steady with a conviction that comes from hard-won wisdom. My granddaughter believed that every life has value. That includes yours, Emma. You think you took a life that night. But Sarah's choice meant that even in death, she gave life to others. She would have forgiven you instantly. She would have seen the whole picture, the chaos, the exhaustion, the impossible circumstances, and she would have said exactly what she said as she died. It's okay. You tried. Marcus stood abruptly and pulled Emma into a fierce embrace. I forgive you, he said, his voice breaking. God help me. I forgive you. Not because what happened was okay, but because holding on to this rage was killing me too. It made me hurt Hope. It made me become someone Sarah wouldn't recognize. Emma sobbed into his shoulder, years of guilt pouring out in great, heaving waves. And I need you to forgive me. Marcus continued, pulling back to look at her directly. For what I did to Hope. For blaming you. For making your life hell when you were already drowning in guilt. You were grieving, Emma managed to say. Grief isn't an excuse for cruelty. Marcus said, Sarah taught me that. She had the biggest heart, literally and figuratively. And here I was, nearly destroying the thing she loved most because I couldn't handle my own pain. They sat back down, still holding hands, and Mrs. Webb placed the journal in Emma's lap. Read it, she said. Know who she was. You've been carrying the weight of her death, but you never knew her life. That needs to change. Emma spent the next hour reading Sarah Webb's journal while they waited for news about Hope. She learned about a girl who volunteered at animal shelters every weekend, who wanted to open a sanctuary for unwanted animals, who wrote poetry about second chances and redemption. A girl who saw beauty in broken things and believed that nothing was beyond saving. By the time Dr. Chen emerged from surgery, Emma felt like she'd known Sarah personally, like they'd been friends in another life. The surgery was successful, Dr. Chen announced, and all three of them stood as one. His kidney function is improving. He'll need ongoing treatment and monitoring, but he's going to live. Marcus actually laughed, a sound of pure relief. Can we see him? He's still unconscious, but yes. Hope lay on the recovery table looking fragile but alive, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths. The three of them stood around him, and Emma felt something shift in the universe, some cosmic rebalancing of debt and grace. Thank you, Sarah, Marcus whispered, his hand on Hope's head. Thank you for being wiser than your father. Thank you for knowing that life always deserves a chance. Emma's phone rang. Dr. Patterson's name appeared on the screen. She answered, and his excited voice crackled through. Emma. The story's gone national. CNN just called me. And more importantly, Pastor Thornton just held an emergency church board meeting. They want to use the excess GoFundMe money. It's up to $60,000 now to start an animal sanctuary. In Sarah's name. Emma looked at Marcus, who'd heard every word. His face transformed with wonder. Where? Emma asked. The old Green Valley meat processing plant. The town's buying it from the county. They want to turn it into Sarah's Hope Sanctuary. Transform that place of death into something that saves lives. Dr. Patterson paused. They want you and Marcus to run it. Together. Marcus started crying again. And Emma realized she was too. From death to life. From judgment to grace. From a septic tank full of poison to a sanctuary full of hope. We'll do it, Emma said, looking at Marcus for confirmation. He nodded emphatically. She would have loved this. Marcus said. It's exactly what she always wanted. The video from the town meeting had over 10 million views by Tuesday. News crews descended on Millbrook, transforming the tiny town into the center of a national conversation about forgiveness, second chances, and redemption. But Emma and Marcus barely noticed the media circus. They were too busy sitting with Hope as he recovered, planning a sanctuary, and learning to live with their grief rather than be destroyed by it. On Wednesday, they brought Hope home to Millbrook together. The entire town gathered to welcome them, not with judgment this time, but with tears and applause. Pastor Thornton stood before them, humbled and transformed by what he'd witnessed. I was wrong, he said simply. We all were. We forgot that our faith is built on grace, not judgment, on redemption, not condemnation. He looked at Emma. Welcome home, Emma, truly home. The church board presented architectural plans for the sanctuary kennels, a medical facility, training areas, space for volunteers. The old plant that had nearly been Hope's grave would become a place where broken things were made whole. "We're calling it Sarah's Hope Sanctuary," one of the board members announced, in honor of Sarah Webb, who believed every life deserved a chance, and in honor of Hope, who proved her right. That evening, Emma and Marcus sat on Emma's cottage porch with Hope between them, watching the sun set over Millbrook. The dog's head rested on Marcus's knee while his paw touched Emma's leg, physically connecting the two people who'd saved him, who he'd saved in return. "She would have been so proud," Marcus said softly, "of the sanctuary, of us figuring this out, of Hope bringing us together instead of tearing us apart." Emma stroked Hope's ears, marveling at how soft they'd become now that he was healthy. "I spent 8 months thinking I destroyed your family, but Sarah's choice meant her death gave life to 5 people, and Hope's survival brought you and me to a place where we could heal. Maybe nothing is ever just tragedy. Maybe there's always some thread of grace running through it if we're brave enough to look." "Sarah believed that," Marcus said. "She used to say, 'Dad, even broken crayons still color.' I never fully understood until now." Hope sighed contentedly, and both of them smiled through their tears. "Co-custody," Emma said, repeating the joke from before. "You get him Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays." Marcus laughed. "Or we just admit we're a family now. Broken, weird, born from tragedy, but a family nonetheless." Emma looked at this man who'd hated her, who'd tried to destroy the dog they both loved, who'd been destroyed himself by grief. And she saw not an enemy, but a fellow survivor, someone who understood that healing isn't about forgetting, but about transforming pain into purpose. "Yeah," she said, "a family, Sarah's family." Hope's tail thumped against the porch, and somewhere in the gathering darkness, Emma felt certain that a 19-year-old girl with a heart big enough to save the world was smiling. 3 months after Hope's surgery, on a crisp Saturday morning in early fall, Sarah's Hope Sanctuary opened its doors for the first time. The transformation of the old Green Valley meat processing plant had been nothing short of miraculous. Where rusted machinery and toxic waste had once defined the landscape, there now stood clean kennels, a state-of-the-art veterinary facility, training areas, and 15 acres of fenced meadow where rescued animals could run free. Over 500 people attended the grand opening. Cars lined the narrow country road for half a mile in both directions, and the parking lot overflowed with vehicles from Tennessee, Kentucky, Alabama, and states beyond. News crews set up cameras to document what one reporter called the most beautiful example of redemption in modern America. Emma stood near the entrance, wearing a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back, looking healthier than she had in years. Beside her, Marcus wore a suit for the first time since Sarah's funeral, though he'd loosened his tie because Hope kept pawing at it. The German shepherd stood between them, his coat gleaming, his eyes bright and alert, a living testament to second chances. Mrs. Patricia Webb cut the ceremonial ribbon with steady hands, tears streaming down her weathered face. "My granddaughter Sarah believed that every life was sacred," she said, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "Human or animal, young or old, perfect or broken, she saw value in everyone and everything. This sanctuary stands as a living monument to that belief." Emma stepped forward to speak, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the microphone. She'd never been comfortable with public speaking, but this felt important, necessary even. "3 months ago, I was drowning," she began, her voice quiet but clear. "Not in water, but in guilt and shame and the crushing weight of a mistake I could never undo. I'd failed to save a young woman's life, and I believed that failure defined me completely." She paused, looking down at Hope, who gazed up at her with absolute trust. "Then I found a dog drowning in toxic waste, a dog I later learned belonged to the very girl I'd failed. And in saving him, or maybe in him saving me, I learned something fundamental. Redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about honoring the past by doing better, being better, choosing life over death even when death seems easier." Her voice grew stronger. "The sanctuary stands on ground where death once happened, daily animals slaughtered, chemicals dumped, life treated as disposable. Now it's where second chances begin, where animals nobody else wants find safety, where broken things are mended, and where all of us— She gestured to Marcus, to the crowd, to herself. Learn that grace is always possible if we're brave enough to accept it. Marcus spoke next, his voice thick with emotion. My daughter Sarah wanted this exact thing. An animal sanctuary where the unwanted, the abused, the forgotten could find home. She didn't live to build it herself. But through a series of events I can only call miraculous, it's been built in her honor. He looked at Emma with genuine warmth. Emma Rodriguez and I started as enemies. Her mistake cost me my daughter. My grief nearly killed Sarah's dog. We were both drowning in different ways. But hope. He rested his hand on the dog's head. Hope pulled us both to shore. He taught us that forgiveness isn't weakness, that healing is possible, that even the most broken relationships can be mended if we're willing to do the work. The crowd applauded, many wiping tears from their eyes. The sanctuary already housed 12 dogs and 8 cats, all rescued from dire situations. Emma and Marcus led tours throughout the day, introducing visitors to each animal, sharing their stories of survival and hope. A 3-legged beagle named Grace, a blind cat called Mercy, a senior pit bull nobody wanted named Redemption. By evening, exhausted but happy, Emma, Marcus, and Hope sat together on a bench overlooking the meadow where several dogs played in the fading sunlight. She would have been so proud, Marcus said softly, echoing words he'd spoken before but which bore repeating. I wish I could have known her, Emma replied. Really known her, not just through tragedy. You do know her, Marcus said. You're living her dream. That's knowing her in the most important way. Hope rested his head on Emma's knee, and she stroked his ears, marveling at how this creature had transformed 3 lives, hers, Marcus's, and his own. 6 months after the sanctuary opened, on a cold February evening, Emma received a phone call that changed everything one more time. Miss Rodriguez, my name is Rachel Martinez. I received Sarah Webb's heart. Emma's own heart seemed to stop. Marcus was visiting that evening, and she put the phone on speaker so he could hear. I've been wanting to reach out for over a year, Rachel continued, her voice warm despite obvious nerves. The hospital gave me your contact information, said you'd become close with Sarah's family. I was wondering if I could meet you, both of you. They arranged for Rachel to visit that weekend. When she arrived at Emma's cottage, she was a petite woman in her late 20s with kind eyes and a gentle smile. She brought her 2 children, a boy of 5 and a girl of 3, who immediately gravitated toward Hope. I was 27 when my heart failed, Rachel explained as they sat in Emma's small living room, tea growing cold in their cups. Viral cardiomyopathy. I had maybe 6 months to live. My children were 2 and newborn. I'd written letters for all their birthdays, for their graduations, for their weddings, everything I'd miss. Tears streamed down her face. And then I got the call. A match. A miracle. Someone's tragedy became my salvation. She looked at Marcus. Your daughter's heartbeat is inside me. Every moment with my children, every breath I take, every laugh and tear an ordinary day, it's all because of Sarah. Rachel placed Emma's hand over her chest. Feel that that's Sarah's strength, Sarah's gift, Sarah's extraordinary heart beating in someone else. Emma felt the steady rhythm beneath her palm and broke down completely. Marcus wrapped his arms around both women, and they cried together, tears of grief and gratitude impossibly intertwined. I spent a year believing I destroyed your family, Emma said through her sobs. But you're alive because of that night. Because Sarah was in that hospital. Because she'd chosen to be a donor. Rachel pulled out her phone and showed them pictures of her children's recent birthday party, a family vacation. Ordinary moments made precious by their improbability. 2 kids have their mother because of Sarah, Rachel said, looking at Marcus. Your daughter lives on in me, in them, in every moment we're given. That's her legacy. Marcus had been quiet, but now he spoke. Sarah used to say that love means giving everything you have to those who need it. She lived that. And even in death, she lived that. He looked at Emma. You didn't take her from the world. You were part of the mechanism that allowed her gift to reach the people who needed it. Before Rachel left, she embraced Emma tightly. Thank you, she whispered, for everything you do, for the sanctuary, for honoring Sarah's memory by saving lives. You're a hero to my family. After she left, Marcus gave Emma an envelope. I've been waiting for the right moment, he said. Inside were photographs of Sarah at various ages, a toddler with gap-toothed smile, a teenager at her high school graduation, a young woman with hope as a puppy. Also included were Sarah's veterinary textbooks, their margins filled with her handwritten notes. I want you to really know her, Marcus said. Not just the girl who died, but the woman she was becoming. She'd want you to have these. You're living her dream. You should have her tools. Emma clutched the photos to her chest. I don't deserve this. None of us deserve grace, Marcus replied, repeating words he'd said before. That's what makes it grace. 1 year after the sanctuary opened, on a perfect spring morning, Sarah's Hope Sanctuary had grown beyond anyone's expectations. 40 animals now called it home. A volunteer staff of 35 helped with daily operations. 3 local schools had integrated the sanctuary into their curriculum, teaching children about compassion and responsibility. The GoFundMe money, combined with ongoing donations, had funded expansion plans that would double the facility's capacity. Emma had become the full-time director, finding purpose she'd never experienced even in her nursing career. Marcus served on the board while continuing his own healing journey. They'd started a support group called Second Chances for people struggling with past mistakes, and it had grown to include 50 members who met weekly. Hope, now fully recovered and thriving, had found his calling as the sanctuary's official greeter. His gentle nature with traumatized animals was extraordinary. He seemed to understand their fear, their pain, their need for patience. Emma often watched him work with new arrivals, lying quietly beside them until they felt safe enough to approach. You found your purpose, haven't you, boy? She whispered to him one afternoon, watching him comfort a terrified rescue dog. That Easter Sunday, Emma, Marcus, Mrs. Webb, and Hope visited Sarah's grave together. They brought fresh flowers, tulips, Sarah's favorite, and sat in the grass beside the headstone that read, Sarah Elizabeth Webb, beloved daughter, every life matters. 40 animals saved so far, Marcus said, placing the flowers gently. 40 lives given second chances because of what you started, Sarah, Mrs. Webb added, and hundreds of people inspired by your story, by Hope's story, by the proof that broken things can be beautiful when mended with love. Emma spoke last, her voice steady with hard-won peace. Thank you, Sarah, for your heart, the one that beats in Rachel, and the metaphorical one that built all this. For your dog, who taught me that redemption is possible. For your legacy, which saves more lives every day. You saved more than you ever knew, including me. Hope lay down on the grave, peaceful and content, and they sat with him in comfortable silence as the afternoon sun painted the cemetery in golden light. Marcus eventually said, I've been thinking about what Sarah used to tell me. Dad, even broken crayons still color. I never understood it until now. We're all broken crayons, you, me, Hope, every animal at the sanctuary. But we still make something beautiful. Emma smiled. We're a strange family, born from tragedy, built on forgiveness, held together by a dog with a prophetic name. The best families usually are, Mrs. Webb said with the wisdom of her years, as they prepared to leave. Hope's tail wagged gently, and Emma felt a certainty she couldn't explain that somewhere, somehow, a 19-year-old girl with an extraordinary heart was watching over them all. They say time heals all wounds, but that's not quite true. Time teaches us to carry our wounds with grace, to transform pain into purpose. Emma Rodriguez learned this from a dog named Hope, who learned it from a girl named Sarah, who knew it all along. In a septic tank filled with poison, two dying souls found each other, and in saving one life, Emma discovered that redemption doesn't erase the past. It honors the past by building a better future. The old meat processing plant, once a place of death, now rings with the sound of barking dogs and purring cats, all given second chances. And every morning, as the sun rises over Sarah's Hope sanctuary, Emma stands beside Hope and whispers the same prayer. "Thank you for not letting me drown." Hope's tail wags because he understands what humans sometimes forget, that grace is always stronger than guilt, that love outlasts loss, and that every ending carries within it the seeds of a new beginning. After all, they saved each other, and in doing so, they learned to save themselves. Sarah's Hope Sanctuary stands today as a testament to the truth that families are not always born. Sometimes they are forged in the fires of shared suffering and mutual grace. Emma, Marcus, Hope, and Mrs. Webb became a family not through blood, but through choosing forgiveness over bitterness, life over death, and gratitude over regret. The moral of their journey is profound yet simple. We are all broken crayons, but we can still create something beautiful. Gratitude for second chances transforms victims into healers. Family, whether human or animal, biological or chosen, becomes the sanctuary where our wounded souls find rest. Emma learned that one mistake does not define a lifetime. Marcus discovered that grief, when channeled into purpose, can honor the lost rather than destroy the living. And Hope proved that the most powerful redemption stories often have four legs and unconditional hearts. Every rescued animal at the sanctuary carries a piece of Sarah's dream forward. Every volunteer embodies her belief that all life matters. Every visitor leaves understanding that judgment can be transformed into grace when we dare to see the whole story. Now we ask you, have you ever been wrongly judged or condemned like Emma, accused of something that didn't reflect your true heart or intentions? How did you find your way back to grace? Share your story below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.